A bipartisan group of lawmakers is now trying to soften the impact of Wisconsin's new alcohol regulations for wedding barns. State Senator Andre Jacques is among 4 legislators who have introduced a bill that would allow wedding barns to hold more events after a judge recently upheld the current law. New at 6, Elise Noy joins us in the studio with what this proposal would change and what could happen next. Elise.
Yeah, Jason, this proposal comes just weeks after a Trempealeau County judge dismissed a lawsuit from wedding barn owners, ruling the current law serves a valid public safety purpose. But supporters of this new bill say the issue now moves from the courtroom to the state capitol and centers on whether these rules go too far for small event venues trying to stay open. Now, under new regulations ready to take effect on January 1st, 2026, wedding barns that don't hold a liquor license must apply for a no-sale event venue permit, limiting them to just 6 events a year and prohibiting hard liquor. Owners have argued those restrictions make it difficult to stay in business, especially for seasonal and family-run operations. Now, the new bill would expand those limits, allowing up to 36 events per year and would allow distilled spirits to be consumed on site.
Consequences of the legislation that passed really are putting a lot of people in a bind and unfortunately not moving Wisconsin forward economically or in terms of really I think options for our communities. So hopeful that we can get things into a better place.
Now, the bill has been introduced but has not yet been scheduled for a hearing. Senator Jacques says he hopes lawmakers will take up the proposal sometime early next year. Back to you, Jason.